It's a good thing that my job is to write rather than follow recipes, because I'm terrible at it. Before I became a test cook, recipes were primarily a source of inspiration, but having spent over a decade crafting them, I've learned just how much info is jammed into a well-tested, thoughtfully written recipe. And since I'm in a space where they're used all of the time, I watch a lot of professionals follow them. Turns out, even the pros do it wrong. So here's how to actually follow a recipe. Okay, this sounds really basic, but stick with me here. Did you know that the vast majority of published recipes have a basic anatomy? Publishers have style guides that their authors use so that the work is consistent and clear. Recipes are usually accompanied by photography and/or a headnote. That can be a short sentence or someone's life story. They tell you what you're going to get. What's the vibe of the dish? Is this a weeknight dinner, an amaze everyone dessert? Is it a weekend-long project piece? There can be information about the dish's origins, foods you might want to serve with it, the utensils you'll need, etc. Finally, any extra info that doesn't quite fit into other sections, that gets tucked into a headnote. They are well worth reading. And I have a confession. This is the part I always have to make myself read. But I know that this is the bonus content that recipe developers give you to set you up for success. Then we get to the ingredient list. With a few exceptions, this is both a shopping list and a prep list. At a glance, you should be able to figure out what you need to buy and what you should do before you start cooking. Finally, we get to the steps, the stuff you need to do in the order you need to do it in. All of this seems pretty straightforward, right? Wrong. There are a lot of little things that can really trip you up, and they add up to disappointment. So, besides looking at the photo and reading the headnote, what else do you need to know? Let's make Andrea Geary's Sichuan Kung Pao chicken, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. As I said earlier, the ingredient list is your shopping list and your prep list. Now, for a lot of people, it's easy to get distracted by the shopping list portion. I tend to run my eye down the list and 1.5 pounds boneless, skinless chicken thighs, check. Soy sauce, check. Cornstarch, check, 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 check. But there's a lot of information that's tucked away in this list that can be missed if you treat it as just a shopping list. So when you read an ingredient list, look out for commas, parentheses, and keywords. Comma placement is really important. Andrea calls for 1 teaspoon of Sichuan peppercorns, comma, ground coarse. That means measure the peppercorns and then grind them. Don't use 1 teaspoon of ground peppercorns, and especially don't use 1 teaspoon of finely ground peppercorns. The difference between these 3 piles of peppercorns is going to mean the difference between well-balanced mala flavor versus too much tingling. Commas also allow recipe writers to slide prep into an ingredient list. Andrea tells us to cut the chicken and celery into 1/2-inch cubes, have the chilies lengthwise and discard the seeds, and that we only use the bottom portions of the scallions, not the greens. In terms of keywords, one that we see in lots of recipes is divided. It's a good word to keep an eye out for. The soy sauce in this recipe is for marinating the chicken and for flavoring the sauce. You don't want to add it all to the chicken and not have enough to make the sauce. Sure, they all go into the skillet eventually, but the whens and hows make a difference. That's why you should always read a recipe through before you start cooking. Other keywords to look out for are plus, drained, reserved, discarded, and words related to temperature like room temperature, chilled, or defrosted. What about words that aren't present? Garlic can be this big or this big. Which one is right? If it's a recipe by me or my colleagues, we'll be specific when necessary. Sometimes we call for 3 garlic cloves, comma minced, and other times, like in this recipe, we call for 1 tablespoon of minced garlic. Because the amount of garlic really changes the flavor of this dish, Andrea specifies a volume to make sure that you're adding the right amount. If the exact amount of garlic didn't make a big difference, she would have said 3 garlic cloves and let you decide how large they should be. After going through the prep portion of the ingredient list and making sure you've got your mise en place set, you can move on to the steps. As you're scanning the steps, ask yourself a few questions. Do you have all the equipment you're going to need? Does the recipe call for an ice bath? Or in the case of this recipe, do I have a plate for those toasted peanuts? It's always a good idea to gather all of the equipment in advance rather than scrambling in the moment. For this recipe, I'm going to need a 12-inch nonstick skillet, a lid, a plate for those peanuts, and a spatula. Are there places where a lot of stuff happens in a short period of time? If that's the case, it's a good idea to line up your ingredients in the order that you'll need them. That's what I've done here for this stir fry. One keyword to look for in the steps is remaining. If step 2 calls for the remaining 1 tablespoon of oil, it means that I should have used some oil in step 1. Did I divide that oil up properly? And finally, the most important thing to do is to look for the visual cues. They're going to guide you through the cooking. Visual cues is a little bit of a misnomer. Recipes will have a thing that you look, smell, listen, or taste for that'll tell you it's time to move on to the next step. They're associated with the time. Use the cues. So what do I mean by this? Well, in this recipe, Andrea tells us to cook the peanuts until they just begin to darken and that it should take 3 to 5 minutes. Now, the reason she gives a range is medium-low heat on your stove is going to be a little bit different than medium-low heat on mine. So whether it takes 2 minutes or 6 minutes, you should cook the peanuts until they just begin to darken. That time, it's to give you an idea of how long you should be cooking. And by the way, if your cook time is outside of that window that the recipe provides, it means that moving forward, you should adjust your heat accordingly. There are a lot of reasons that visual cues are a better guide than times. Your cooktop is just one factor. Induction, gas, and electric ranges all heat your cookware in very different ways, and that can really mess with the timing. Check out these peanuts I toasted earlier. Now, I cooked all of these for 3 minutes over medium-low heat on 3 different cooktops. Pretty different, right? That's why you shouldn't rely on time alone. After browning the peanuts, the recipe has us toasting the chilies and peppercorns, and I'm looking for the arbles to just darken slightly. Now, this is a fairly low-stakes situation, but imagine if you were working with something pricey like a beef Wellington, or you had to bring a gorgeous dessert to a party. You're really going to want to get those visual cues right. I can see these are beginning to darken, so I'm going to add my aromatics, or rather the remainder of my aromatics. This is ginger and garlic. And I just want to cook this out until they're fragrant, kind of break up the clumps. So rather than stir frying as I would in a wok, I'm actually going to just spread this chicken into an even layer and pop a lid on it. We'll increase the heat to medium-high and let this run for 1 minute. One thing I told you to keep an eye out for is temperature. And one question I get a lot is, why doesn't this recipe have a temperature? Sometimes it's because the meat will definitely be done and there's no need to temp it. This applies to things that are small or thin, say chicken cutlets or the chicken in the stir fry, and sometimes it's because getting the meat to a certain temperature isn't enough. If you've got something tough like brisket, cooking it to 195 won't make it tender. So you're going to have to check for doneness with a fork or a knife instead of a thermometer. This has gone for another minute with the lid on. It's time to ditch this lid and get the celery in. And at this point, I'm just going to keep cooking this, stirring occasionally until that chicken is tender and cooked through. Going to take about 2 to 3 minutes. Now that that chicken's cooked, I'm going to add the sauce, and we'll cook this until that sauce is thick, glossy, and it's clinging to the chicken. That'll take 3 to 5 minutes. This looks pretty great. I'm going to finish this up with the scallion whites and greens and our peanuts. Wow, this smells so good. Let's have a taste. Andrea's Kung Pao chicken is awesome. It's got this beautiful, savory, rich, sweet sauce. That chicken is tender. It's cooked through even though I didn't temp it. But most of all, that mala flavor, that numbing, tingling, spicy heat that you expect in Sichuan food, it's present. It's girded by this like savory, earthy richness from the peanuts. Fantastic. I need some rice though, it's spicy. As a recipe writer, I'm really invested in your success. I want to give you all the information you need to make the dish that my recipe promises, but I can only do so much. You need to be an active reader and look for the breadcrumbs I've left for you if you want to get the most from any recipe. So as I said, I have to make myself read the headnotes when it comes to recipes. What do you have trouble with? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this video useful, give it a like. And be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new episodes. For more recipes, tips, and techniques, head over to cooksillustrated.com.